Have you ever found yourself in a conversation, getting really excited about a deep, complex idea, only to look up from your train of thought and see just blank stares? Or that subtle, awkward shift as someone quickly changes the subject to something lighter, something safer? It's a strange, lonely feeling. The sense that the more you learn, the more you see the intricate connections in the world, the more isolated you become. That the more you understand, the less people seem to want to listen. If you've ever felt that, I want to tell you right now, it is not just in your head. Society has always had a complicated and often fearful relationship with its deep thinkers. Not because they are wrong, but because they see what others are not ready or willing to see. This isn't a new phenomenon from the internet age. It's a pattern woven throughout human history. We're talking about brilliant minds like Socrates, Galileo, and Tesla, visionaries who were ridiculed, silenced, or ignored in their own time. The reason wasn't a lack of intelligence. It was because they made people profoundly uncomfortable. The brutally honest philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer went so far as to suggest that intelligence itself was a kind of curse, one that dooms those who see the world too clearly to a life of isolation. But why? Why does society push back so hard against those who simply think differently? The answer is buried deep within our own psychology. Think about it like this. When you stand next to someone who is incredibly strong, you don't necessarily feel weak. You might admire their discipline or their strength. When you meet someone who is incredibly wealthy, you might feel a pang of envy, but their bank account doesn't feel like a personal attack on your character. But something strange happens when you encounter someone who is intellectually superior. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker, often without saying a word, holds up a mirror to the people around them. And this mirror doesn't just reflect new ideas, it reflects back the limitations, the unexamined beliefs, and the intellectual comfort zones of others. People don't forgive that easily. The mere presence of someone who thinks deeply can make others feel inadequate, even if the deep thinker is humble, kind, and says nothing at all. But why does this happen? Why is intelligence, more than any other kind of superiority, so uniquely provoking? To understand this, we have to look at how our minds process these different qualities. Physical strength, wealth, beauty, we see these things as external. We can admire them or envy them, but they don't necessarily challenge the core of our self-perception. Intelligence, however, operates on a completely different level. Unlike a strong body or a full wallet, intelligence is deeply, intimately tied to our identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, our beliefs, our unique understanding of the world. So when we meet someone who thinks on a much deeper level, someone who effortlessly questions the very things we take for granted, it can feel like a direct assault on our sense of self. Instead of admiring that intelligence, many people subconsciously resist it. It's not because the deep thinker is being arrogant, but because their very presence forces an uncomfortable confrontation with one's own intellectual limits. This is why, throughout history, deep thinkers have been pushed to the fringes. Their insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge egos, and human beings, by their very nature, will do almost anything to protect their ego from feeling uncomfortable. Take a moment and reflect on your own life. Have you ever tried to share a complex idea in a casual chat, only to be met with a polite but vacant smile? Have you noticed how quickly a group conversation will pivot away the moment it strays from surface-level chatter? That's not a coincidence. It's a collective defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their minds can go into a state of self-preservation. Instead of feeling curious, they become resistant. Instead of engaging, they dismiss. This is why so many philosophers, visionaries, and intellectuals find themselves isolated, not because they want to be alone, but because society gently, or not so gently, pushes them away. What's fascinating is that studies show in most social settings, confidence is valued far more than actual intelligence. People are instinctively drawn to those who project absolute certainty, even if their ideas are simplistic or flawed. This explains why charismatic but shallow thinkers can gain such massive influence, while deep thinkers who speak with nuance and acknowledge complexity often struggle to find an audience. History is filled with populist leaders and viral influencers who thrive by telling people exactly what they want to hear, reinforcing existing beliefs rather than challenging them to think more critically. The person who seeks truth, who embraces the gray areas, becomes disconnected from the majority who crave the comfort of black and white answers. This mirror effect doesn't just explain why society resists deep thinkers, it shows why society resists change itself. But is this all just psychology? Just hurt feelings and fragile egos? Or is there scientific proof that people actually, physically fear intelligence? Well, modern neuroscience gives us a fascinating and, frankly, shocking answer. Studies have shown that when people are made to feel intellectually inferior, their brain scans show the amygdala, the brain's ancient, primal alarm system, lighting up. This is the exact same region that fires up when you see a snake or stand on the edge of a cliff. In the simplest terms, your brain can process a challenging idea from a deep thinker as a genuine threat, a danger on the same level as a physical predator. So no, you're not just being paranoid when you feel that tension in the room. It's a real biological fight-or-flight response. But why would intelligence trigger the same fear circuits as a physical threat? The answer is in our evolution. For most of human history, your survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the tribe. It depended on being accepted by the tribe. Our ancestors thrived in groups where social harmony was the ultimate currency. Fitting in meant safety. Being rejected or cast out could be a death sentence, leading to starvation or vulnerability to predators. Our brains are therefore exquisitely wired for social acceptance, often at the expense of intellectual pursuit. When someone highly intelligent enters a social setting, they can unknowingly disrupt this delicate tribal balance. Their new ideas challenge existing social norms and group dynamics. This triggers the brain's ancient defense mechanism, which sees them not just as a deeper thinker, but as a potential enemy threatening the stability of the group. This is a core reason why many deep thinkers feel so isolated. It's not a lack of social skills on their part. It's that their very nature makes them stand out in a world that is biologically programmed to value fitting in. A 2021 study at Stanford University uncovered something even more revealing. This rejection of deep thinkers is highly dependent on context. When people interact with an intellectual one-on-one, they feel far less threatened. But in a group setting, that threat response spikes dramatically. Why the change? Because in a group, social status is everything. People aren't just reacting to the intelligence itself, they're reacting to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels outshined or intellectually exposed by a deep thinker in front of the group, their instinct is to undermine or exclude that person to protect their own social standing. This explains why deep thinkers often have their most meaningful conversations in private, yet struggle to connect in large social environments. On top of this biological wiring, our minds are also full of cognitive biases that make it even harder to accept challenging ideas. There's the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with low ability tend to dramatically overestimate their own intelligence, leading them to dismiss thinkers who are genuinely more knowledgeable. Then there's the status quo bias, our brain's natural preference for familiar ideas over new, complex truths because familiarity feels safe. And perhaps most frustratingly, the backfire effect. When people are confronted with facts that contradict their core beliefs, they often don't change their minds. They dig in their heels and believe even more strongly. A deep thinker introducing a disruptive idea will face this wall of resistance constantly. And now, in our digital age, social media has put this rejection of intelligence on steroids. Algorithms are designed to prioritize engagement over depth. Controversial, emotionally charged, and simplistic content spreads like wildfire, while thoughtful, nuanced arguments die in the dark. The most viral content is simple, catchy, and often misleading. The more intellectual you are, the harder it is to compress your deep, layered ideas into a 15-second, viral-friendly soundbite. As a result, society is increasingly rewarding entertainment over enlightenment, making the path for deep thinkers even more challenging. This rejection isn't just social, it's biological, psychological, and cultural. It is baked into our DNA, reinforced by group dynamics, and amplified by modern technology. This doesn't mean deep thinkers are flawed or that they should stop sharing their ideas, but it does mean they need to understand the powerful forces working against them. So if society resists intelligence, what does it actually embrace? The answer, in a word, is comfort. A world where predictable illusions are almost always preferred over uncomfortable truths. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most famously pessimistic but brutally honest philosophers, believed that intelligence wasn't a gift, but a burden. Unlike other thinkers who saw intellect as the key to a successful life, Schopenhauer argued that the smarter a person becomes, the more they will inevitably struggle to connect with the society around them. But what led him to such a bleak conclusion? What did he see that made intelligence feel like such a curse? His entire philosophy was built on a powerful concept he called the will. Imagine the will as a blind, irrational, relentless force that drives all of life, including human behavior. According to Schopenhauer, most people are completely controlled by what he called the will to live. This is the default human operating system. It's the instinctual drive to seek pleasure, to pursue comfort, to survive and to reproduce, all while avoiding pain and difficult truths. It's the force that keeps people chasing money, status, and fleeting moments of happiness, without ever stopping to ask why. However, highly intelligent people, he observed, operate differently. Over time, their powerful intellect develops a different drive, the will to truth. This is an insatiable, often painful desire to understand reality as it actually is, not as we wish it were. This creates a fundamental, irreconcilable split between the deep thinker and the rest of society. While the average person seeks pleasure and avoids anything that causes discomfort, the deep thinker seeks truth, even if that truth leads directly to pain and isolation. This is the source of the disconnect. Where most people find meaning in social rituals, entertainment, and the steady routines of daily life, the deep thinker often feels a profound sense of disillusionment with these things. They see them as distractions, as sophisticated games people play to avoid confronting the deeper, often terrifying, existential questions about life. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understands human nature, the harder it becomes for them to genuinely relate to others on a surface level. They see through the lies and deceptions, both big and small. Think about it. So many of our social interactions are built on a foundation of small talk, subtle status games, and polite, necessary dishonesty. Deep thinkers, who value truth and authenticity above all else, often find it exhausting or even impossible to participate in this social theater. They crave depth, but society overwhelmingly favors simplicity. They want to discuss the meaning of it all, while everyone else is content to discuss the weather. This makes it incredibly difficult for them to engage in everyday interactions without feeling bored, disconnected, or like an actor in a play they never auditioned for. Furthermore, they begin to recognize the potential futility of human ambition. Schopenhauer saw the endless chase for money, power, and romantic validation as an illusion, a hamster wheel of desire that never leads to lasting satisfaction. Deep thinkers often step back and question the very purpose of these pursuits, which makes them appear distant, aloof, or indifferent to the things that excite and motivate the majority of people. This is why intelligent people so often feel misunderstood, alienated, and sometimes even resented. Their very presence, their quiet refusal to play the game, forces others to confront uncomfortable truths about their own lives and desires. And as we've established, most people would rather avoid that at all costs. Schopenhauer famously compared high intelligence to a heightened sense of awareness, a gift that feels more like a curse. He wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." His reasoning was elegantly simple. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. The more you are aware of the world's flaws, contradictions, and suffering, the harder it is to find simple, uncomplicated happiness in it. The more you think, the lonelier you become. For Schopenhauer, happiness and intelligence were almost inversely proportional. He believed that ignorance, not wisdom, was the true key to a contented life. This is why some of history's greatest minds, figures like Nietzsche, Pascal, Kafka, have so often been plagued by depression, existential dread, and profound social isolation. They simply saw too much. But Schopenhauer didn't just diagnose the problem. He also offered a way forward. He believed that while intelligence inevitably leads to a degree of loneliness, there are ways for deep thinkers to cope with, and even thrive in, their isolation. First, he advised them to embrace solitude. For Schopenhauer, solitude wasn't a punishment. It was a privilege. It was the only state in which the mind could be truly free from the distracting and often corrupting influence of society. He believed that deep thinkers should actively seek out their alone time, using it for intellectual and creative pursuits, rather than desperately seeking validation from a world that would never understand them. Second, he said to find like-minded individuals. Instead of wasting energy trying to fit into the mainstream, Schopenhauer advised intelligent people to seek out the very few who think as they do. This tribe doesn't have to be people you see every day. It can be found in the pages of books, in the study of philosophy, or today in niche online communities. The goal is to connect with great minds and great ideas, reminding yourself that you are not the first person to think these thoughts. And third, he urged thinkers to engage with the world wisely. He warned against the naive impulse to share your deepest insights with people who are not ready or willing to hear them. This, he said, was like trying to teach calculus to a child. It only leads to frustration for everyone. Instead, he suggested that thinkers should become keen observers of society. Learn its patterns, understand its motivations, and choose your words and your battles carefully. It's about learning to navigate the world as it is, not as you wish it would be. His teachings serve as a powerful guide for any modern deep thinker struggling with social rejection. While your intelligence may lead to loneliness, it also grants you freedom from illusion, a profound sense of wisdom, and a much deeper understanding of life's complexities. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as a double-edged sword. It is a source of both great power and great pain. While it allows you to see reality with breathtaking clarity, it also distances you from those who prefer to live in the comfortable shade of illusion. In the end, Schopenhauer's philosophy confirms what many deep thinkers have always suspected. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals. You aren't rejected because you're wrong. You're often rejected because you're right, but you're right too soon. So if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are not strange. You are simply seeing the world for what it really is. But does this mean that deep thinkers are doomed to a life of quiet isolation, finding solace only in old books and private thoughts? Or are there ways to navigate the broader world while still preserving your intellectual depth? The truth is, society isn't built to embrace the deep thinker. It's built to maintain stability. And for the vast majority of people, comfort will always be more valuable than truth. But what happens when the very institutions that are supposed to foster intelligence, our schools, our workplaces, our political systems, also fall prey to this preference for comfort over complexity? The truth is, society isn't just a collection of individuals. It's a massive, complex machine built to maintain its own stability. Most people prefer the comfort of a predictable world over the disruptive nature of truth. And this preference isn't just personal. It's embedded in the very institutions that are supposed to shape our minds and guide our progress. At its core, the human brain craves what psychologists call cognitive ease. It prefers simple, familiar information because processing it requires less mental energy. A complicated, nuanced, or unfamiliar idea is perceived by the brain as difficult and therefore potentially dangerous. This deep psychological preference for comfort over complexity explains why our most important institutions often end up rewarding conformity over true intellectual courage. Think about the education system. In theory, schools are places that celebrate intelligence, but in reality, what do they often reward? Obedience. The students who succeed are typically the ones who can diligently memorize information and regurgitate it on command. The student who truly thinks deeply, the one who questions the curriculum, challenges the teacher's assumptions, or sees a flaw in the textbook's logic, is often labeled a troublemaker or disruptive. They are punished for the very act of independent thought that education is supposed to foster. This pattern continues into our professional lives. The corporate world does not, by default, favor its most intelligent or innovative employees. It favors those who fit the culture. The person who quietly maintains the existing power structure, who doesn't rock the boat, and who makes their superiors feel secure, is often promoted far ahead of the brilliant visionary who sees a better way of doing things. That visionary is a threat. Their ideas might create more work, render old methods obsolete, or even challenge the authority of their own manager. So they are managed, sidelined, or pushed out. And look at politics. Leaders who offer bold, unpopular, but logical solutions to difficult problems are often defeated by those who simply tell people what they want to hear. Simple slogans, emotional appeals, and the promise of returning to a mythical, better past are far more effective at winning votes than a complex, data-driven policy proposal. Society claims to value intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking, But in practice, it often only celebrates these qualities in hindsight, long after the person is gone and their disruptive ideas have become safe, familiar, and accepted. History gives us a brutal gallery of geniuses who were outcasts in their own time. Consider Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. He spent his life wandering Athens, doing nothing more than asking people to question their own beliefs, to examine their lives, and to use logic over blind tradition. For this, he was not celebrated. He was put on trial for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. But his real crime was far more dangerous. He was teaching people to think for themselves. Given the choice to escape, he chose to drink poison rather than abandon his principles, famously stating that the unexamined life is not worth living. His death sent a chilling message that has echoed through the centuries. The establishment fears nothing more than a mind it cannot control. Centuries later, Galileo Galilei committed a similar crime. He discovered the truth. When his telescope proved that the Earth revolved around the sun, he shattered a cornerstone of religious dogma. The Church, which held immense power by being the sole arbiter of knowledge, branded him a heretic. He was forced to publicly recant his own discoveries under the threat of torture. We now praise him as a hero of science, but he spent the last years of his life under house arrest, his brilliant work banned for nearly a century. Galileo's story proves that even the most undeniable truths will be viciously rejected if they threaten an existing power structure. Then there was Friedrich Nietzsche, whose work was so radical and unsettling it was largely dismissed during his lifetime. He argued that traditional morality was a crutch, that society was built on comforting lies, and that true strength came from forging your own values. These ideas were far too much for the people of his time to handle. He was written off as insane, his books ignored. Yet today, Nietzsche's philosophy is a cornerstone of psychology, literature, and modern thought, proving that society often rejects a thinker in the present, only to build its future upon their ideas. Nikola Tesla was a visionary who dreamed of free, wireless energy for the entire world, but those in power saw his ideas not as a gift to humanity, but as a threat to their business models. Industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan profited from selling electricity through wires. Tesla's idea of free energy was a direct threat to their fortunes, so it was systematically shut down. Despite his genius, Tesla died broke and alone in a hotel room, a forgotten man whose ideas had been stolen and suppressed. His life is a perfect, tragic example of how society often rewards shrewd marketers over true visionaries. Or consider Alan Turing. His genius in cryptography was instrumental in breaking the Enigma code, shortening World War II and saving millions of lives. His theories on computing laid the very foundation for the artificial intelligence we talk about today. Yet, instead of being honored as a hero, he was chemically castrated by the British government for being gay. This persecution led to his tragic suicide at just 41. Society used his mind to save itself and then discarded him because he didn't conform to its social norms. Each of these thinkers, and countless others like Hypatia of Alexandria, a brilliant female philosopher murdered by a mob for her rational thought, shared the same fate. They introduced ideas that were too advanced, too disruptive, and too challenging for their time. They were rejected, ridiculed, or punished while they were alive, only for their ideas to later become the foundation of human progress. So if you have ever felt misunderstood for thinking deeply, you are in remarkable company. What can you do? It means you must learn to navigate the world wisely. Not every person or every place is ready for your deepest thoughts. Save them for those who have earned the right to hear them, for people who genuinely appreciate them. You don't need millions to understand you, just the right few. Seek out your tribe, whether in books, online communities, or quiet conversations. Learn to build a bridge for your ideas. The great Albert Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Learn to communicate your depth in a way that doesn't overwhelm others. It's not about dumbing down your thoughts. It's about making them accessible. Remember what Schopenhauer said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." As a deep thinker, you see the world differently. That will always make some people uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean you should ever stop thinking, questioning, and seeing what others miss. Society needs its deep thinkers. It just doesn't always know it. So if you have ever felt like an outsider for your thoughts, remember this. You are not alone. You are not broken. And while society may fear deep thinkers, it is the deep thinkers who, time and time again, are the ones who push humanity forward. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking deeply? Let's start a conversation. And if you want to explore more insights from history's greatest minds, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.